When we talk about structural steel construction, you can see that Chapter 4 is talking about all of these different components like the beam and the column connections and how the steel is erected with several 3D drawings of how the purlins are on top of the beams and how the girts are connected at the columns, and drawings in this chapter that are similar to what you'll see on these full sheets of drawings that we have, which is kind of great because the book coordinates directly to the blueprints that we're looking at. Along with in the book are all of the common steel shapes, even pages of the steel books that we refer to for all the different flange and web sizes and different connections. So take a look. It's got cross bracing and construction details and different types of shapes that you'll be learning about. It even has here, like I said, details of how the joist sits on the beam at the joist seat and how it extends into the structure, along with weld symbols that are important for us to understand. If you look on page 92, it's a great reference to what the different weld symbols on the drawings that you'll see, and even several examples of composite floor decking. When we look at metal deck with concrete inside, and we will refer to that on the drawings, but also, like I said, Chapter 4 has several of those details. So take a look, go through the chapter, answer the questions at the end of Chapter 4. What I'm going to go through in this video is the blueprint itself. There are 2 pages, and I've put together a series of drawings. We'll answer some of the questions also. So let's take a look. This is sheet 9, and if we break it down, we have a whole section of notes. And then if we get a little closer, you can see that this plan E1 is all about the base plate details. Here's the base plate with the details. So what we have is we have the column that comes down to the footing or the concrete, and it's welded to a plate at the bottom, and that plate is bolted to the concrete here in this detail. These details are important for you to understand because as you're reading blueprints, you'll see that the details show where the gusset plates are, which are really just pieces of steel that connect a couple of different members. You'll see it in a lot of other designs. And also the bracing member that comes into this gusset plate and then connected to the column right there at the base plate. So looking at the plan, you have the letters that show which one of these base plates are being used at that column. So here at column 6 we have AB1, and then over here we have a detail for AB1. And sometimes the only difference between these two is the spacing, but depending on the structure itself. So that's part of this sheet. We have the base plate plan and also the details. I like these blueprints because we do see sometimes this 3D image of how the joist bears on the beam right here, joist bearing detail, and how it extends here at the top chord and how it's welded. There's the weld symbol there. So take a look at that. There may be a couple of questions that are in that area. The K series open web joists, if you look it up, there are several different series of open web joists, and it depends on how long you want it to span and basically what you're looking for in your design. So the plan E6 goes with these details at E8. So if you look at the plan, you'll see all of these different joists, and the joists are numbered based on the joists over here in the details. And then we have a beam that goes from column to column, and this diagonal bridging that goes from the beam to the joist. So you'll see a note here that says 4J E8. So 4J on E8 on this plan is referring to this detail 4J in the section E8. And they're talking about this diagonal bridging. I'm hoping you can see that as you look at these drawings, you start to see how they're connected a little bit more. And if you take a look at each one of these details, you'll see that there's this continuous bracing that runs through between the joists. So this plan goes, E6 goes with E8. So as you look at this sheet, each one of these details goes with either joists and how they tie in, or the base plate. And if we pull over here to E4, you'll see, if I get closer and you have the sheets in front of you, that this has everything to do with the columns. So each one of these lines represents the type of column is here, and the beams. So we have columns and beams that make up the bays. We talked a little bit about bays in the chapter there. And if there are any openings, they need to be framed in with additional beams that we can use between the beams and maybe even at the column. So this is kind of typical of a lot of different commercial jobs. And moving forward with this sheet, because I know I want to come back to some of the details in the questions for the blueprints, we have a detail here, E10A, that shows the continuous purlin that's sitting on the roof beam. And then E9 is the plan of the panels that sit on the purlins. So I think you'll see that it all ties together in a wall section on sheet 10. So let's go over to sheet 10 and look for these building kind of sections, E20 and E16. I think E20 really does show it well. So if you take a look at E20, you'll see how we have the columns, we have the roof beams, we have the purlins that are running opposite the beams or over the beams. If the bays were longer, for sure we would have the purlins in the opposite direction. And then the metal panel is going to sit on the purlins here of the roof. But this also shows, and this is what sheet 10's all about, or a lot of it is, we have this 6-inch diameter standard pipe, and there's a beam on top of that, and then this enclosure, which is the roof screen elevation, screening in the HVAC and different mechanical equipment. We have TS for tube steel here, and just taking a look at the notes, you see the notes that are referring to on this page. Going back to look at the whole page, again we have a panel of notes, and these notes will show you details about the composite floor deck. And then we have also a plan showing the cross bracing and how the flange is braced, the flange of the beam. So it's just gives it an extra support and the wall sections, or the sections, building sections that we just looked at. We also have elevations of the girts that are tying into the columns and the beams that are coming across. So I have a PowerPoint that brings some of these elements to us, like all the different structural steel members that we're using. But this drawing here does show you these purlins that are sitting on the roof beam, and that's in our drawing. This kind of like Z purlin. This is the joist itself, and it has different seats that bear on these beams. We looked at the plan of these. I just wanted to show you that here's the flange and the web, and the bracing that we saw in one of the plans was bracing that goes in here to kind of stiffen and strengthen that connection. A drawing of how the columns, the beams sit on the columns, and the joists then sit on the beams. Other diagrams of different unique trusses that might also be part of the design. This, instead of using a beam, there is another here truss, and then a steel truss, and then the floor joists like sit on that truss. A few details showing what I was talking about as far as the columns that come out of the roof and pick up some kind of screen. Here's the screen that we see the drawings of, with the column and the panels here. Here's that flange bracing that there's a detail for in the drawings. So hopefully you'll have your drawings open, you're looking at them, you're seeing the cross bracing, you're seeing the flange here. This is the base plate detail. We have back on the drawings here the base plate plan and details. So this is here the plate with the anchor bolts and kind of a photo of it there. These are also these tie rods that are cross anchors or bracing, along with this X bracing that you might see on the drawings there. This diagram really brings all of those key terms into a 3D drawing for us. The girts are going to hold up the wall system, and then the purlins here at the top are going to hold up the roof metal panels or deck. Here are those kind of Z shaped roof purlins that we're using, along with the girts on the side. Same thing here. I've worked on so many of these over the years. It becomes very familiar after a while on how the girts go from column to column and hold up the metal panel. And then some cross bracing here. So when you look at these drawings, sheet 9 and 10, you can start to see that for this project, these drawings pull together the whole system. The base plate, the column, the joist, the girts and purlins, and also details that go with the panels and how they're erected. So you will not need to answer all of the questions for this chapter. Take a look in Canvas and see which which questions for the blueprint portion I am asking you to answer. The chapter questions, there are only so many of them, I think 32. So I added 18 more to make a total of 50 questions. But I'm going to go through a couple of those to give you an idea of it. So, for instance, on page 104, number 24 is asking the tube attached to the top of the beam on detail S1 is how long? So you look for S1, you find it on sheet 9, and then you see this tube steel here, and they're asking you how long it is. There it is, 2'6". The tube steel lifts up these studs that are supposed to be embedded in the metal deck. So we have two different details. When we have to take into consideration the height of the seat of the joist, we have this detail, and when the deck goes right across the beam, we have this detail. So it looks sort of like this, where the studs take some of that shear force. And then another example is number 31 on page 104. The question asks, as shown on details 1J, 2J, 3J, and 5J, open web steel joist must bear on the steel beam at least how many inches? So you can see, based on what we talked about, the joist is bearing on the beam, and for those details, it's 2.5 inches. Okay, so read through the chapter. Hopefully you had a chance to watch this video so you could take a look at and learn a little bit more about reading the drawings and getting a better understanding of those drawings so that you can read blueprints. And the more you look at those drawings, the easier it will be to understand what is going on in the bigger picture of everything in these sheets.